This week on Now in America, we're pulling back the curtain and looking at the lives of Americans because everyone has a story to tell. Today, you're meeting Philip Reed, a senior editor for Edmunds.com. He worked undercover as a car salesman for 3 months, and he's revealing the secrets that dealers don't want you to know.
I'm Philip Reed, and for 3 months I worked as an undercover car salesman. The whole structure of the dealership was such that it was almost like a paramilitary organization. I knew that if they found out who I was, I could have potentially been in physical danger. Often I felt like the enemy when I was approaching customers. Very often I was aware that the customer was not getting a good deal. We were taught a process which is generally known in the industry as payment packing, or packing the payments. And essentially what you do is you try to get the customer to agree to a very high monthly payment on a car, so high that it creates a lot of room, and other products and services can be then added into there at what seems to be very little cost. Now, the whole thing was tainted by the idea that I was essentially there to keep the profit for the dealership as high as possible and to never really reveal the true cost of the vehicle and the true cost of what the customer was going to be paying. In order to get a customer to switch from a finance agreement to a lease agreement, very often the customer wasn't even aware of that. So they would say, you know, these prices are too high, we can't afford this car. So the sales manager would say, well, what if I could actually lower your payments and also lower your down payment? Would you be willing to buy the car then? And they would use buy, or they would use, you know, other terms, but they were actually talking about a lease agreement, which is something very different. And this is not uncommon, that there are people that sign contracts and wind up leasing cars at a much higher rate than they could actually, in the long run, finance it for. When I was being trained, they taught me a tactic that they called stealing the trade-in. They would pretend to call the used car manager, and they'd say, could you tell me the last 6 figures that you got on the Nissan Versa at auction? And then you would write down fictitious but very, very low numbers, as if you were getting this from a real source, but you weren't actually even talking to anybody. And the customer, you wouldn't even have to present it to the customer, because they're sitting there watching you write it down, and they're thinking, oh my gosh, I thought my car was worth a lot more than that. There was a manager that I heard about who actually undervalued the value of a trade-in by $6,000. And that's bad enough, but what was really bad was that he was called out in one of the general dealership meetings and treated like a hero, because he essentially took $6,000 of value away from this customer. But they treated him like a hero for doing that. One of the things that I had always heard was that the sales offices were bugged. And when I went to apply for a job, I found that this was true. What they do is they actually go into cubicles and they'll press the intercom button on the telephone system so that the sales managers can hear what's happening over the intercom. So yes, in a way, the sales offices are bugged. So you have to be very careful of what you say when the salesperson leaves the sales office, because likely you may be being listened to by the sales manager. Over the years, occasionally it's been revealed that I was the author of this, which has kind of shaken up the industry. The #1 negative response that I get is, you're taking food away from me and my family. This is my living, and you have no business telling people these things. And I've also heard from some dealers that thought that I did a service because I represented the industry accurately, but I also kind of sent out a warning shot in terms of, you know, customers don't like this. If you want to sell more cars, don't treat them this way. Even though I did this project several years ago, I can tell you that most of these games are alive and well in a lot of dealerships around the country.